Hello friends! Today I'm going to pacify my little crybaby over here by giving him exactly what he wants in the form of this fantastic color kit by ZigZagJoe. And don't worry, it will keep your vintage Mac a vintage Mac. It does not eliminate the motherboard like those fancy-dancy Mac mini hack jobs you've probably seen, resulting in an interesting, yet fake, vintage Mac. No, the good news is this color kit simply replaces the black and white CRT and analog board with a high-quality color LCD, a PDS video card, and custom analog board. To illustrate why I think so highly of this kit, let's ponder 4 Macs from the past. In January 1984, Apple launched the first Macintosh. It shipped with a scant amount of RAM, single floppy drive, no hard disk, and a black and white 9-inch CRT that couldn't even display shades of gray. Despite its flaws, the small all-in-one design kickstarted a lovable line of machines we now know as compact Macs. 3 years later, in 1987, Apple shipped its first color Mac called the Macintosh 2. Looking nothing like Macs that came before, it was highly upgradable but massive. Measuring a whopping 18.7 inches wide, it's anything but compact. In fact, you can sit 2 compact Macs on top. In 1989, Apple released the fastest and most upgradable black and white compact Mac ever, the SE30. One upgrade in particular gives you 256 grays on the internal CRT and full color on external displays. So it's no surprise that the SE30 is my favorite 68K Mac. Apple finally gave us a color compact Mac known as the Color Classic in 1993. But Apple had to do a major redesign of the plastic case to fit the color CRT. Some Mac fans even hated it, longing instead for a color screen inside their beloved 1980s compact Macs. Now, I've grown to love my Color Classic Mystic, but there's still a lot to be said about having color inside this highly collectible SE30. To me, it's the holy grail of upgrades. And here's the first half of the LCD kit, and I'll start by describing the dummy analog board. It's called dummy not because it's useless or fake, but because it doesn't have as many components as the stock SE and SE30 analog board has. For example, the flyback transformer and all the circuitry that would be used to drive the CRT is not necessary because you're not going to have a CRT. The LCD kit replaces all that, but it does have some important pass-through features here on the circuit board, and you also have your standard connectors that you're accustomed to, your power supply, which you're going to use, your stock power supply, or a replacement power supply will connect here. Same cable, same connector you're always used to. Your main wiring harness that leads to your motherboard will go here, again same connector, and same old connector if you have a spinning platter hard drive, or just use this connector to connect to some other kind of drive in your computer. And then you're going to have a connector for your fan. You're going to have to pull the fan off of your old analog board and connect its power here. And then you have a connection to the LCD here. Next, we have a PDS video card. It's called 30 Video HC, and it includes a little back panel. You know, you've got the little hole in the back of your SE30, and this will allow you to connect the included female ribbon cable and connector through there, so you can connect an external monitor, which is pretty neat. And then you have a very, very thin ribbon cable here that's called an FPC data cable. And this is protected very nicely by this cream-colored 3D printed holder so that it doesn't get damaged in shipping. And that's a very nice and thoughtful touch by ZigZagJoe. And then we have 4 pieces of number 8 screws that are 3/4 inch in length. These are Phillips screws that will be used for mounting the LCD. And the second half of the kit includes this specially packed bag, which is housing the LCD, and it's giving us a big warning here: do not open with a sharp object, which I assume is going to mean not only an X-Acto knife, but scissors as well, which it's eliminating most of the tools I normally use. But there's an LCD inside, so you don't want to scratch it or cut anything on the inside. So I'm going to have to open it with my fingers, I guess. And this is the side it seems to wrap around. So I guess we can just tear it open, and it's got bubble wrap here, hopefully this is not going to cause any problem. You guys are a lot smarter than me, so you'll probably figure out a better way to open yours, but okay, so I've got a plastic bag in here. All right, well, I don't want to tear that bag, but it looks like the bag is... No, I got the bubble wrap here. Okay. And checking on the inside, that is all she wrote. And then we've got the LCD in a bag. Oh, just lay them down like this. So here's the front side of the LCD. And don't worry, this plasticky thing here is just a protector. And we'll remove that a bit later. And here is the back of the LCD. I did not put any of this together. This is what ZigZagJoe assembled on his end very nicely. And it has the 3D printed mounting bracket. And remember the 4 screws that I mentioned, they'll go in each of the corners there. This is for the power, to power the LCD, and has what's called a Berg connector on it, and that connects to your matching white connector here on your dummy analog board. And then you're going to have this connector for the very, very thin ribbon cable that I discussed before. The cable is called FPC, and that will lead from this connector over here to the back of your 30 video HC PDS card over here. And wow, just very nicely designed. And of course, we have instructions that I printed out that take you through the whole process that I'm going to tell you now. Now it's time to do the take apart. You'll need to lay your SE30 CRT down on a soft surface like I've done here. Make sure that any program switch that you might have here, it needs to be removed. And then you're going to need to take your Torx T15. I have a very long one here, as you can see. And I put links in the text description whenever I show teardowns like this, so you can check that if you don't have one. But you'll need to remove 2 screws here to begin with, and then we'll do it also in the handle. And then once we're done there, we'll have to sometimes pry it a little bit. It can sometimes get stuck up here, and then it comes right off. Now your machine will look different than mine. As you can see, I've got the bare naked analog board solder side here, but I'm pretty sure yours is going to have the standard little insulating sheet on it. And that's just because I swap out this so much, I just leave it off. And there's no harm in leaving it off, but that's the only fundamental difference here. Also, because I swap out the motherboard so much, I also leave off the metal shield, and it could be that you're going to have a metal shield on the back, and you're going to need to remove that shield in order to get the motherboard off. But you'll also notice that I also have this little guy here. I had it 3D printed in nylon, STL files in the text description. And what this does is it protects these little protruding metal edges from the metal chassis. So when you set your SE30 down on a desk, a nice wooden desk, it's not going to allow the metal to scratch up, because it's it serves as a soft guard of sorts. And it's really quite neat. So as you saw, I had it on here even with the case back on. And it actually does just barely fit. So I just usually leave them on all the time so I can easily pull off the case and then just sit down my SE30 on my desk without the case back on and do some testing, which is pretty neat. Now, we're going to discharge the CRT in a little bit, but I'm not going to do it first just because I know my bleeder resistor works. I know this has been disconnected for a long period of time and there's no charge in it. Obviously you don't, so if you feel uncomfortable removing any cards that you have installed, then you can do this discharge first, but I'm going to go ahead and remove my cards because I know everything's okay for me to do that. I'm not going to put my hand up here anyway. And of course the machine is disconnected from the wall, it's turned off. And I have a Synchro 30S board installed here, and if you haven't seen my video on that, please go ahead and see it. Very neat, 256 megabytes of RAM this little guy offers, so I'm going to remove him. And then I've got a blue SCSI. This is an older version 1, but it's in a SCSI writer. And I have a video on that too, what do you know? And see, there's a SCSI writer there. And it allows me to put it directly into that internal SCSI connector. And now it's time to discharge the CRT. We can see I've got just a flathead screwdriver with a single wire with 2 large alligator clips on it. One is connected to this ground lug up here. That's what it's called, the ground lug, in the upper left corner of your CRT. And the other is connected to my screwdriver. I also have the computer connected to power because even though it's switched off, it allows the chassis to be grounded to earth that way because I have this cable connected to an earth grounded power outlet. Some people don't do that, but I do, just because it's an often recommended official way of doing it. And then you just want to make sure that you don't put yourself in contact with the metal here. And then you can just pull up the suction cup, right? And then you're going to push down, and it's already discharged, so there's not going to be a spark, but basically you're just pushing down. These 2 guys are holding it inside that hole there, and that's all there is to it. It's very easy to discharge, and again, you can discharge before you disconnect your cards or after. It's really up to you, whatever you feel most comfortable with. Then with the CRT safely discharged, you can use your Torx T15 to unscrew the ground lug. Very easy to do that. And then that will allow us to remove the yoke board. And we can then start disconnecting the connectors from both the motherboard and the analog board. I'm now going to take out the motherboard. You'll notice mine is black. This is the KMac Vintage SE30 Reloaded that Will Jacobs did for me. And I've got my Daystar 50 megahertz power cache installed with custom ROM sim and RTC. Pretty neat. We now want to disconnect our power supply's chassis ground. And now it's time to remove the power supply and analog board, and you can see the screws whether you have this on or not. So you can just start anywhere. These are the 4 power supply screws, and there's 2 over here for the analog and 2 down here for the analog. And then you want to remove your little metal shield down there, and remember to keep the 4 screws that are for the power supply separate from the 4 analog board mounting screws because the threads are different. Now I can more easily disconnect my power supply from the analog board and just pull him up and out, and then just take out the power supply. And now with him sitting face down on a soft surface, you want to take your Torx T15 and remove all 4 screws. And with the screws removed, be sure to bag them and store them with your CRT. And we just want to carefully lift up the CRT and pull him out. And now it's time to install our FPC cable, and we can go ahead and remove it from its protective 3D printed little guy here, and he expands out. You don't want to cut this, obviously. You don't want to make a hard fold in it so there's a crease in it. And we're going to put him in here, and there's this little black piece here that we have to take a close look at. Oh, and by the way, I should have shown you this earlier, but it's always good to make sure you're grounded. So your strap should be to a good earth ground in your building. And that way, just in case, you're not going to accidentally zap something. That applies not simply to this LCD, but in handling the motherboard and other things. And I didn't show that earlier, but anyway, it's always good to do that just so you don't short out anything by accident. Okay, now right now this is pulled back away from the white connector. If yours is like this, which means it's all the way up against the white connector, you're going to need to pull it back. Don't yank it back hard, you don't want to tear it off. Just very little pressure is all that's required to pull it back. And then once done, on both ends of the connector we have a blue side, and then we have a pin side. And the pins need to go down and the blue side needs to go up, and we're going to stick it in just like so, and that seems to be about as far as he's going to go. And then we want to push while holding it. I want to pull it close to the connector itself. And if it's at an angle, you're going to have to, I'll just go ahead and show you. When the cable's in there, it's a little bit harder. So if it's at an angle like this, no, that's bad. You want to make sure he's truly straight in. And then it takes a little bit more pressure than pulling it out without the cable in, but that has it secured in here. Now you don't want to, yank really hard to test it or anything like that, but this black piece is as far as it's going to go, and it has the blue part secured. And now the instructions say we want to remove this plastic protective sheet, and there is tape on both sides that we need to remove. Then we need to flip him over like this, and this is going to be the way it's mounted, with this open space going to the top of your SE30 and the PCB side going to the bottom. I need to get my papers out of the way here. Make sure that my cables are not curled under. And then just need to get him lined up here. And what you're going to do is you're going to be using the 4 screws that are included with the kit. And the reason you're not going to use the Torx ones is because those are too short. These are longer. And we're going to put in our first screw here. Just put him in barely there. Then caddy corner. Then over here. Then, before I get them all screwed down, I'll look at it from the front. It looks pretty centered, but gravity is pulling it down because all the screws are loose. It could go up a little bit, but yeah, that's pretty much confirming nothing is really way off at all. And with gravity down, I can see it's pushed all the way this way, which it needs to go a little bit more up. And then we can start tightening more. And it says we don't want to tighten them too much. Here's kind of a close-up shot, handheld, of the 3D printed bezel. You can see it goes around and kind of simulates that dark border around the visible area of the CRT. And I just wanted to mention, it's not a problem at all, but if you look at it from an angle, an extreme angle, because the case back is off, you can see the light coming through in little parts. I mean, that's just a very narrow gap, but the 3D printed bezel doesn't perfectly come up against the housing. There needs to be some tolerance there, but once the case is closed, it should be pitch dark inside and everything should be fine, and you shouldn't see any light at all coming through. And now it's time to remove the fan and metal mounting bracket from your analog board. The first thing we're going to need to do is desolder. Now, alternatively, what you could possibly do is buy a new fan. This is a Noctua replacement fan anyway. And I think I've seen one of these brackets on one of the printables or somewhere in the past. If I can find it, I'll put a link to it in the text description. But if you can find a 3D printed one mount, then you could get a Noctua fan, and then you wouldn't need to remove it from your old analog board. And that way you can keep everything intact, which can come in handy because you might want to use the analog board for an SE or another SE30. And now we want to remove these 4 screws here. And with the screws out, voila, he comes off. And the fan sits on the ZigZagJoe analog board, like so. And we then just put in the screws. Now it's time to put in our fan wires. You're going to need a teensy tiny flathead screwdriver, like I have here, in order to screw them down. Polarity is marked. We see that my yellow wire, which is positive, needs to go in there, like so. And then I'm not going to shorten them because if I ever want to put it back, I'm going to need some length on them. It's okay if they're a bit long. And then just make sure it's tightened down enough to where you cannot pull them out. And they're in there. And the next step is to mount our power supply on the dummy analog board, like so. And then it's a matter of mounting the screws. Then connecting your power supply. Now it's time to put in our analog board. We want to make sure that the power supply goes in first and the green PCB is going to stay on the outside. And there's no little knob on front, so it should be easier to put him in. And we just have to make sure you've got these little hooks down here, that the indentations on the bottom goes into those. And then up here, needs to fit into that slot. Okay, and then, yep, that'll fit. And here it is, all the screws inside. I did not have any problem whatsoever, no alignment issues. And no, the circuit board does not actually touch my little 3D printed gizmo down there. There's actually a very tiny little gap between the two, so it's fully compatible. And I really like this 3D printed equivalent of that vinyl sheet. And this is really the only place that you'd want to keep it covered from accidental shorts. So very well thought out and nicely designed. And then we need to connect our little ground wire. Now before I put my motherboard back in, I just want to mention a few things. As you saw before, I removed my 256 megabyte PDS card called Synchro 30, and I'm just going to do a basic test when I put this back in. So instead of using my Synchro 30 card, I'm just going to use RAM. And so I've put in 8 16 megabyte RAM SIMs, which gives me a total of 128 megabytes of RAM, and I have a custom ROM SIM, which will disable the RAM checking at startup. So having this maxed out amount of RAM here will not slow the boot up time at all. And again, this is my Daystar Power Cache 50 megahertz 68030 CPU with FPU. And you know, this is kind of the ideal setup because it leaves your PDS card free. And I think Bowl, who is also the original creator of this motherboard, SE30 Reloaded, has created recreations of this particular CPU socketed accelerator in the past. But I just want to make a few more comments about this motherboard because it's really neat. It has a custom RTC chip. RTC stands for real-time clock, and this has memory if you leave your PRAM battery out. And on these SE30 Reloaded boards, you can see that the shape of this is for a button cell, so it takes a different kind of battery than the stock motherboards, and the thinking is that this is going to be less likely to leak. And it could be that some of you, well, you don't even want to have a PRAM battery at all. And the neat thing about this RTC is because it has memory, you technically don't have to, because this memory will save everything except for the date and time, which means your mouse tracking, 32-bit addressing, if you turn it on, it'll remember that state. And it's kind of neat. So if you don't mind, you know, having set the date and time, or if you just don't care about the date and time, then you can leave your PRAM battery out, and then you can yank the power cord and leave it completely off. And the next time you power it up, it's going to remember your mouse tracking, the addressing, 24-bit or 32-bit addressing mode, and all the other things that normally get stored in PRAM because this has memory. The other comment that I'll make is that you'll notice that this chip looks different than these other two, and that's because when Will Jacobs of KMac Vintage took my old motherboard and moved all the components over, he found that one of these Bourne's filters, that's what they're called, Bourne's filters, was bad. And he said, do you want me to replace it with another yellow chip so it'll look consistent in terms of color, or would you like me to use a modern replacement, which is going to be green? And I said, yeah, give me the modern replacement because it's kind of neat. You can see exactly what's inside these Bourne's filter chips. with the resistors and capacitors. So I thought it looks neat, and so I requested that he do that. Basically, he, as far as I know, he at KMac Vintage is the only person who does the SE30 board as a service. If you try to do it yourself, I mean, you can do it yourself. All of this is freely available. You could order them up from JLC PCB or PCBWay. You'd have to order 5 though, see? But if you do that, then you could get all the components pre-soldered on in the back. Sometimes there's a group buy. People will come together and get these boards made. But now it's a lot more complicated because of tariffs in the United States. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out for many of you who are based there. And I know that most of my viewers are based in North America. So that makes things a little bit more complicated. But what Will is doing is he is not just giving you a bare raw board so you can do it yourself. He's going to take your old board, move the components over to the new board. Any bad components he finds, he's going to let you know about, and he potentially could swap them out so that you're going to have a working board. And it's really neat because a lot of SE30 motherboards have warped slightly over time in the middle because there's no support in the middle, and they dip down, and sometimes you'll have problems with your ROM or RAM SIM sockets because of the board warping. Of course, leaky capacitors can cut traces that you may not even know about. So having a reloaded board has a lot of merit. And I just wanted to mention that, not to, Will doesn't pay me to say this, but I just wanted to say he did an amazing job. And I actually wanted to buy one of these boards so I could, not because I ever doubted him, but I just wanted to see what kind of work he does. And the soldering looks stuck. I mean, it's just pretty amazing. He did an ultrasonic cleaning of the board. And of course, I tested it with many different PDS cards and other things prior to making this video and confirmed it worked great. So I know that once I put this into my machine, everything should be fine. So I'll put links in the text description. If it's not a cheap thing to have him make one of these boards completely from your old board, because you're going to have to pay for the shipping to ship him your old board too. But if you want a pristine board, I mean, this is the way to do it, and it'll save you a lot of hassle from doing it yourself. I mean, I didn't want to do all that SMD surface mount soldering myself, and that's why I was willing to pay Will Jacobs to do this board. So that's my take on the board. And now that my motherboard is installed, I'll go ahead and connect the LCD to the dummy analog board using the Berg connector. Takes a little bit of force to get it in there because it's got a little locking piece, but it's not too bad. Now we want to do our main wiring harness. By the way, I put links in the text description if you want to upgrade your harness, which I strongly recommend, to 16 gauge wires. It makes a fabulous difference in terms of eliminating a lot of the voltage drop you'd normally get, especially with upgrades. I don't have a drive that requires power from here. If you do, you want to connect this. Then I have my Blue SCSI version 1 with SCSI writer that I'm going to install. You obviously want to reconnect your hard drive. If you have a hard drive here, usually there's a cable that goes from here to your drive. And then my floppy disk drive. And now we want to install this ribbon cable into our PDS video card. We need to just carefully pull back that black piece, as I told you before. And you don't want to excessively twist your cable. Remember, the blue is going in this way. You don't want to have the pin side up, but the blue side up like this. And then make sure it's in straight. And it looks like I got him in there okay. All right. And the PDS video card will slot in this way so that this little dip switch is showing on this side. But I'm not going to press him down yet. And here's why I haven't put in the PDS card yet. You have to decide if you want to have the external connector to a VGA monitor, in which case you're going to need to have this metal piece mounted on your SE30's chassis. Now, it could be some of you don't even have one of these. It might even be missing, in which case you're going to have a problem. But technically speaking, you don't even really need it if all you're going to need is just color on the internal LCD. So you can just decide if you want to install this or not. But if you do want to install it, as you see here, you're going to have to make sure that the little bolts on your VGA connector are removed so that you can put in your VGA connector through the little included PCB, and you'll have to screw him down in here. And then once that's done, you'll be putting it inside here with the included bolts, of course, and mounting it in this. And when you have it installed, it looks like this. You then need to install your connector into the PDS card. Make sure it's all the way deep down in there. Then need to put our PDS card down into the slot. And it shouldn't take a lot of force to get him in there. Now, in order to do my initial test, I decided to go ahead and plug in an external LCD monitor. Since it's mirrored, it's not going to detract performance any, and we can see how it works on the first power up. All right, the moment of truth, the smoke test. I'm going to power them both on at the same time. Ready, set. Hey, got a bong, my Dell powered up. Wow. Wow, right? Yeah, quite bright compared to the Dell. Now the Dell is maximum brightness. This is not maximum brightness. This is the setting that it came with. It's just the default setting. You can adjust it on the back, but man, it looks absolutely fantastic. I really don't even want to touch it, but yes, you can adjust it. Unfortunately, there's no knob down here, so you're not going to have a convenient way to adjust it without the case back off, but yes, you can adjust the brightness if you so choose. But boy, this is really quite bright. Now I have my camera set kind of on an oddball setting so that this isn't too blown out. It's a little bit brighter. My camera setting is a little bit brighter than this should be, but this is also a little bit darker. In real life, there is kind of a same level of disparity. You're seeing some more and some discolorations a little bit just because on a 4K video in my camera, you're not actually seeing that moire and discoloration in real life. So I'll try to get zoom shots a little bit later, but wow. All right, now let's take a look here. We've got 129 megabytes of RAM. But what we really want to see are the monitor's control panel. And as I was telling you before, if I click identify, both are identifying as one because any external monitor that you attach is mirrored. You're not going to be able to put palettes on one monitor and share them, unfortunately. Not that you're really going to do real work on this old vintage Mac anyway, but still. So you might say, well, what's the benefit of having the external monitor? And yeah, that's the whole point I was trying to make. Probably you're not going to even need to install the back connector unless you want to have like an overhead projector or some kind of means of displaying what you're seeing on screen onto the big screen if giving some kind of presentation like at a VCF show, right? Vintage Computer Fair show. Maybe you want to give a presentation of a vintage Mac and then you want to have a VGA output to show the content of your screen on a much larger screen, which obviously would be much, much larger than this Dell 17-inch. I would see that use case for it. I mean, if some of you have other use cases, you can let me know your thoughts down in the comments. But besides that, I personally really don't have a use case for it because this LCD is just so fantastic. It's just, holy cow. And this is native 640 by 480 pixel resolution. And later I'll zoom in on it so you can see just how sharp it is. But it is so sharp, it's just unbelievably perfect in every single way. And of course here on my Dell, this is not its native resolution, so it's a little bit fuzzy because it's interpolation, right? It's taking that 640 by 480 and blowing it up to full screen, even though its native pixels are not 640 by 480. So if you compare the two in terms of pixel sharpness, nothing's going to get better than this. All right. Now, if you go to the options, you can see that we're here at 640 by 480 at 60 Hertz. You have some other options too, 800 by 600, and from what ZigZagJoe was saying, if you choose this, I think it requires a restart because it's not immediately switching. He said there will be a noticeable slowdown. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be able to display 800 by 600 on the internal display, so that would have to be on the external. And I mean, we can choose it and just go ahead and restart and see what happens. Let's just go ahead and do that before we get into the color. Just to see. Hopefully it's going to boot. Yes. Okay, so this cannot display higher than 640 by 480. Duh. 640 by 480 native. So you're not going to get anything. And so if you accidentally set it and restart, but you don't have an external monitor attached, you're not going to be able to see anything on the screen. So if we go here and take a look at monitors, it's identifying as one. We see we're at 800 by 600 at 75 hertz here. So I guess you could say maybe that's another use case. If you want higher than 640 by 480 resolution, you're going to need to use an external monitor. And if you want to do that, then yes, the PDS video card will support those higher resolutions. I'm not sure about 1024 by 768, but technically this Dell 17-inch VGA display supports that. So that might theoretically work. But anyway, that's going to make this video even longer. So what I'm going to do is, okay, I'm just going to go back to 640 by 480, which will require a restart. And then once it boots, we're going to give color a try. Now keep in mind that this looks very speedy because I've got that 50 megahertz Daystar CPU socketed power cache, which also has FPU, and it's got the power central control panel to make sure that the caches are enabled. And now we see it. Okay, so let's go to monitors control panel again, and we're going to change it to 256 grays. So I'm going to change it to colors now. So now we've got 256 colors on both the internal and external monitor. And by the way, off camera, I actually did benchmarks to confirm that if you have an external display attached, it does not change the video scores. And theoretically, you should know that because it's mirrored, but just to let you know, connecting this monitor isn't going to slow you down. Okay, 256. Let's go ahead and boost it to thousands. All right, now we're getting some really, we can't go any higher than that. So best way to test that is load up Photoshop and display something in thousands of colors. And actually it would display in millions if we had that capability, because this is the holy grail of upgrades, right? We want to be able to see that. Beautiful. I mean, absolutely beautiful. I mean, just superb color. And as I said before, you know, this isn't bad for what it is, but it's not its native resolution. It's a little bit fuzzier than this. It's not nearly as bright. And also this is matte and this is glossy. So the disadvantage of glossy is you're going to have some reflections, but the blacks, I mean, just are perceptibly deeper. It makes the colors pop. It's just really quite shocking to see on a vintage Mac. And the best part is, this is still a vintage Mac. You don't got some kind of Raspberry Pi in there. You're not emulating it with a Mac Mini. It's still the SE30 that I've loved for all these years. It just has 640 by 480, now showing thousands of colors. All right, let's try something else here. I've got some other color files. I got Dragon Ball. Boom. And this type of pick lets you see how deep the blacks are. I mean, it's not an OLED, so your blacks aren't completely 100% black. You're going to have some level of backlight bleed through. But, you know, if I move my head, I'm looking at it off camera, so you're not going to see my head, but I'm not really able to perceptively see any faults in the black levels here. It's just really, really good. And even the Dell, the black levels are pretty good when displaying this. So anyway, if you have a black background and a nice color pick, that's a way to check your black levels. We'll try another one here. Just beautiful. Absolutely stunning. Okay, let's quit out of Photoshop and take a look at a few other things. First of all, clockometer will tell us that, yes indeed, we're running at 50.19 megahertz. And I actually ran some benchmarks. We've got speedometer here, and we see here on the right side, this is my SE30 with a 50 megahertz power cache without the LCD retrofit, which means the CRT. I did not have any other video card. This is just the stock black and white video. And here on the left is with the 50 megahertz same power cache, but with the LCD. And of course, I told you before that the external LCD, whether it's connected or not, doesn't matter, but I just still happened to have it connected when I did this test. Both of the tests were done with System 7.1, And you see, by and large, look, CPU 13.73 for both. And then disk scores roughly the same. Math, you know, you've got only a very slight difference, but the graphics, that's a pretty big difference there. We've got 7.14 without the video card in there, and then with the LCD Retrofit kit, we've got 11.52, and that's why the PR score is 7.7 over here at left, and it's only 7.08 over here. And if we look down here, it's even more noticeable. Now, of course, on the right, I didn't have a color video card. It's just a stock video, so it's only going to do monochrome. And it got a 1.79. But take a look over here on the left, 2.89. That's pretty fast. And I did test it when I switched it to black and white. It's an SE30, so you're probably going to use it in black and white a lot. It is far snappier when you're using it in black and white with this LCD Retrofit kit, even though it's higher resolution, right? 512 by 342 in the stock, 640 by 480 right now, and still it's quite a bit faster because of that video card being faster. And then, of course, when you go up to 2-bit, 4-bit, 8-bit, as you increase your color depth, you're going to get a slowdown there. But still, nothing to sneeze at for sure. And then we have system info. Now, the stock SE30, I've got it selected here. And this is the video scores. So just to compare the video scores. When you go to 256 colors, it's a bit slower than the stock SE30 in black and white. But, as you can see up here, when you're doing black and white, it's even faster than my SE30 with a 40 megahertz 68040. And yeah, the CPU does matter. The CPU and clock speed pushes the video speeds higher. So you can see it got 49.9, but even though it's a 68030, which is an inferior chip to the 68040, still because of the video card, we're getting 58.3. So that's just emphasizing how fast it is. Now, if I go to CPU, you can see here pretty much all of them are, let's see, that's with demo. Okay, so this is with the power cache. It's roughly about 18, 17.9, 17.9. So the CPU among all of my power cache testing was the same with the, you know, FPU and so on. You're going to get roughly the same, 5.51, 5.5. So it's just I wanted to show you that the video scores are going to be faster for monochrome. And of course, comparably speaking, if you go to 256 or especially thousands, you're going to get more of a slowdown. So you might say, okay, how does that impact gaming? Aha. Well, the big question is, can it run Doom? Right? Everybody wants to know. Now, I tested this with and without QuickTime. And even if I install QuickTime under System 7.1, I couldn't get the music to play. But when I did it under 7.5.5, then the music would play. And so what you're about to hear... Oh. Yes, I had it set to thousands. So yes, we went to set it to 256. But yeah, when you don't play the music, as you can expect logically, right, you're going to have a little bit better performance in the game. And if you have the music playing, then your frame rate is going to drop a bit. Unfortunately, I've never been able to get frame rate to display on any of my Macs whenever I play Doom, so I can't really tell you numerically how different it is. I can only say it just has a different feel to it. Now, this is a 68030. Even when playing Doom on my 68040 accelerated Color Classic Mystic, you know, there's some issues there. But, you know, this is full screen right now, right? Full screen. This isn't the highest resolution. If you go up to the menus, you can bump up the graphics detail, and that's, of course, going to make it unplayable if you bump it up. This is the lowest level of detail. And even then, you can see it's a little bit jumpy, but it's still very playable. So if we go here, go to Options, Sound Volume, bump up our sound effects here, so you can actually hear it. Okay, now even though it says music volume is up, because the QuickTime is not installed, it's not going to play that. So this is pretty much full screen, except the bottom, ammo, health, and so on, that is displaying. And so if you go up one higher than this, then it truly will fill full screen and this will not display. But that will make the frame rate slightly slower than it is now. But as you can see, even here on the demo, it's really not that bad. So let's go up and do the new game. And we'll do the second level. Hey, not too much violence there. Okay. Right? You can see I'm just panning around. Yeah, it's not buttery smooth, but I mean, at this level of motion is really pretty good. You can see I'm roaming around here, right? All right, let's see if I can get this guy. All right, I got him. And then we'll go around here and get our little health kits. And it's okay. You see, it's not too bad, right? I'm going around and around. All right, to get this guy here. Got him. So, yeah, it's playable, and unlike the stock resolution, nothing is going to get cut off because you're playing it at 640/480. So not only is Doom playable if you've got a 50 megahertz accelerator like I have in it, obviously, but you're going to need to have that. You're not going to be able to play this at 60 megahertz, right? You're going to need to have some kind of accelerator in it. But this LCD kit makes it playable without any truncation whatsoever. And then, you know, if you want better performance, then you can adjust your detail, or you can shrink in the game options, the screen size, right? Right? You can shrink it, and if you don't mind that. And now everything's faster. Still not perfectly buttery smooth, but faster still, right? So just something to consider. Games that previously would not play at all on your SE30 because they require 640/480 will now play, and even games that were playable before but got truncated, now you don't have to worry about that. Well, I actually took a closer look at ZigZagJoe's last page of documentation. It says that 256 shades of gray is supported on external monitors, but on this internal monitor, if you actually look closely down here, this is only 16 shades of gray. And he's saying that's due to some kind of hardware limitation. And if you go to thousands, and you can see it's set on grays over here, but it actually displays colors. And he's saying that's a limitation of Mac OS. So just to let you know, if we go to 16 colors here and look at a grayscale image, this is the Mac Team grayscale image. Notice the CRT and this area. It's being dithered fairly nicely for being only 16 colors. But if I change it to 256, then you can see it's more splotchy. And back here you can see, we'll zoom in, right? So this is 256 grays, but take a look at the CRT. It's only displaying 16 colors, and it's not dithering well. And if we go back to the 16 grays, you see, it's only 16, but Photoshop is able to dither it better. And then if we go to thousands, then you're getting it even better still. So this is just to show you that if you want to display something in 256 grays, you're actually going to need to choose thousands. And because this is going to be a color mode, whether you have the radio button set to grays or to colors, it really doesn't seem to matter in my testing whether you choose grays or colors, because if we look at it again, right, the CRT, it looks the same with thousands of grays versus thousands of colors, because, as I said, both are actually color when you choose thousands. So again, when you set it to 256 grays, you're actually getting, based upon what I'm saying in Photoshop, inferior 16 gray dithering versus just choosing 16 grays, right? See the big difference there. So if you want to see the best grayscale, then you obviously should choose thousands. And of course, the same is going to be true of your full color images as well. And here's just a quick test to show you what happens when we boot into System 6.0.8, which of course is supported by the SE30. We have to choose 24-bit addressing. But as you can see, it boots up just fine. We've got the color Apple logo there. And what do you know? There we go. So System 6 works just fine. With everything powered up, Noctua fan spinning, Blue SCSI installed, and my 16 gauge beefed up main wiring harness at the back, we can see we've got 12.4 volts and 4.92. It's not exactly 5.0 volts, but this is a minor voltage drop. It's not significant at all. And in light of the fact I've got a 50 megahertz accelerator in there, this is really quite good. And then we've got 35.2 watts being pulled by the entire system from the wall socket. So what did it cost me to pacify this little crybaby, you ask? You have two buying options. The first of which is eBay, where the kit sells for a pricey $600 plus shipping. But the second option is what I went with. His 68K MLA forum thread prices it at $500 plus shipping. That's a no-brainer. I sent him a private message, confirmed the details, then paid by PayPal. UPS shipping to Japan cost me $50 and took 7 days to arrive. But the question is this holy grail of upgrades worth more than $500? Well, it certainly isn't if you're unwilling to remove the CRT. And it definitely isn't if you dislike SE30 upgrades in general. But to me, the SE30 is all about upgrades. Some people will actually pay upwards of $2,000 for a Micron Exceed kit, giving them 256 grays on their internal CRT and color only on an external display. I have an Exceed kit myself, but paid only a couple $100s for it back in 2010. Now, if you're the kind of person who complains that the cost of an upgrade is more than the computer itself, obviously this LCD kit is not for you, but that mindset will hold you back from buying all manner of upgrades like an accelerator. Because whether you buy vintage or a modern recreation, they're pretty pricey and often more than the cost of an SE30. And on the topic of accelerators, I didn't want to make this video longer than an hour, so I didn't go through and test multiple PDS cards. I just told you that I have my CPU socketed accelerator. But if you visit ZigZagJoe's 68K MLA thread, link in the text description, you'll see a full compatibility list of cards. Now, I will say that my Synchro 30S 256 megabyte RAM card should in theory work. I just haven't had time to test it yet. But one of the benefits of this kit is that it removes the CRT, which means you don't have that huge honking piece of glass out there getting in your way. And so you can put a tall card like this in your machine and then put another card, firing off to the side. There's an upper limit to how many cards you can add because of signal degradation, increased noise, voltage drops due to resistivity in the traces and all that. But people have been adding multiple cards, 2, 3 cards, even more sometimes, for years, and haven't had any major problems. So this gives you a little bit more freedom to experiment with things like that. Now, in my eyes, this kit is all about the LCD. And believe me, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how far to put my camera back from this screen, how much to zoom in my lens. I couldn't defocus my lens to get rid of moire like I do when filming my Color Classic Mystic, because I wanted to show you how sharp this is. Suffice it to say, I tried my best, but I failed a little bit. There's some flickering that came in on the video, but there is no flickering in real life. Okay, it's tack-sharp. I mean, there's no banding. The brightness is superb. The colors are absolutely fantastic when you see it with your own eyes. And yeah, it doesn't give you millions of colors on the internal screen, but neither does my Color Classic Mystic. It too is capped at thousands of colors, but I don't see that as a tremendous loss. Also, before I even bought this kit, I was thinking, well, is it going to be really an SE30 type of experience with a flat panel, because the front, you know, the CRT is kind of curved glass. And so I asked a few people before I even bought this kit, how, other owners of the kit obviously, how they like it. And none of them had any regrets. One person did tell me he bought an acrylic lens, link in the text description, but he had regrets. And he didn't buy it from ZigZagJoe, it's somebody else who made it so that it will work with this kit. And he had regrets because it adds reflections, and he's very sensitive to that. It could be you aren't sensitive to that, but for that reason I didn't buy it. And when I saw this in person, even though it's a flat screen, I really didn't have any negative impressions about it at all, probably because of that black 3D printed bezel around the screen. Because as you know, when you look at the picture on your SE30, the displayable area is a rectangle, and then outside that you've got a little bit of a black area on your CRT. And so when I look at this, I kind of get that same impression. It's color, it's higher resolution, it's different, yeah, but it just didn't feel like a hack job. It felt natural, but yet you're getting something special. And also, this LCD, it's not an IPS display, but the viewing angles, it makes me feel like it actually is. All said, I do not regret the $550 that I purchased for this. I do not, and that's highly recommended. And besides, I have another SE30, which still has its CRT, so it's not like I'm missing out on a 100% retro experience, right, with all stock equipment. Also, ZigZagJoe spent a lot of time, clearly, in not only creating this kit, but in figuring out how to properly mass produce it as a product in a high quality way. And not only that, but he thought out how to properly pack it for domestic shipping in the US, but also for international shipping, so that this delicate LCD and the extremely thin and delicate ribbon cable don't wind up damaged during shipping. I mean, it takes a lot of effort to come up with a kit this complex, let alone sell one. And so I give ZigZagJoe a double thumbs up on the job well done. If you liked what you saw today, please consider giving it your own thumbs up, and please subscribe and click the bell icon if you'd like to see notifications of my future videos. Thank you for watching today, folks, and I hope you all have a fantastic week.